Okay, I am back. And yes, this is a creepy clown picture. It's one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen. I got it at Goodwill. It is matted like that. Like, so the picture is only in this tiny corner, and it's like this clown with a teacup hat and kittens, and it's just weird as hell. And the first time I saw it, I wanted it, but I was kind of like, I don't know. Wayne's like, no, you're not hanging that anywhere in the house. But so we ended up hanging it in my little reading nook. But I went back, I think it was 2 weeks later, and it was still there. And I'm like, gotta get it. But without further ado, Judge Gray. And what I forgot to show you in the beginning of the video too, I have this wonderful, cozy, fake fur blanket too for sitting up here in my window nook. And yeah, that's nail supplies. I make use of every inch of space in my house. Okay, that's better. All right, Liberty and the War on Drugs. And I want to see, I think I did highlight quite a bit in here because this is a really important chapter. Okay. So Judge Gray says, I'm a former drug warrior. Although I may not have given it too much critical thought during my time of service in the U.S. Navy, JAG Corps, and as a federal prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Los Angeles, I believe that people using and possessing illicit drugs rightfully should be in jail. In fact, I was probably raised just like you were, which was to equate cocaine and heroin with bad, with evil, and with prison. But then I was appointed as a trial court in Orange County, and I began to realize that we were not doing anything positive for low-level drug offenders. I also began to realize that when we arrested drug sellers, it really did not make any difference in the overall availability of drugs, because other drug dealers or potential drug dealers simply treated the situation as a new job opportunity. Nothing like the real world to change your mind. And he noted that we do have finite resources, even though the state, thinks that they can keep taxing us, and that will be forever. The state can only steal so much. And he noted that the tougher we get on drug crimes, literally, the softer we get in the prosecution of everything else. True. He says, as a result, on April 8th, 1992, he remembers the date, I did something quite unusual for a sitting trial court judge. I took a half-day vacation, held a press conference in the plaza behind our courthouse, and recommended that we legalize all drugs. I wonder if that's videoed anywhere. I would love to see that. And then he, gives some more details, but he wants to ask a seemingly simple question. What is a drug? And he said, yes, aspirin, antibiotics are drugs. But he suggests that we're talking about mind-altering and sometimes addicting substances. And labels, ones we would all, put in that category, cocaine, heroin, and so on. But he says other highly available mind-altering and sometimes addicting substances must also be included in our policy, such as alcohol, nicotine, and even caffeine. He says, I use alcohol and decreasingly caffeine, and so do most other adults I know, and lots of people smoke cigarettes. So why should those substances be included in our national drug control policy? It is hypocritical. He pointed out how dangerous cigarettes can be. He said he quoted the Surgeon General under President Ronald Reagan, C. Everett Koop, to say, if 2 jumbo jets filled with passengers were to crash and burn every day, killing everyone on board, that is the number of people that die each year in our country because they use tobacco. And then he says our approach to tobacco usage has been a remarkable success story. Our efforts at honest education have resulted in the material decrease of tobacco usage. And by regulating the locations where people can smoke, we have significantly reduced the irritation and harms of secondhand smoke to non-smokers. probably no laws of prohibition could have ever obtained these positive results. I am going to disagree with him there. I'm not going to disagree that it hasn't been a success, but it wasn't the honest education. It was the absolute persecution of smokers. The ban goes way beyond reducing the irritation and harms, allegedly, of secondhand smoke. And we could have let the market do that. I'm distressed that a libertarian would be praising that. But again, you know, he's much more moderate, and I get it. And then he talks about alcohol. And he does a little bit of the history of prohibition and says initially prohibition, quote unquote, worked. There was an initial decrease in alcohol usage. He said, but by the time alcohol prohibition was finally repealed 13 years later, alcohol usage had returned to its initial rate. And he said alcohol was more dangerous because the cardinal rule of prohibition is always push the sale of the stronger stuff. To explain, if bootleggers, man, I'm tongue-tied today. If bootleggers face the same criminal justice sanctions for selling a barrel of beer as they would for selling a barrel of whiskey, which will they sell? The answer to that is easy, the one they'll make more money on. Are a couple pages stuck together here? Yeah, stubborn little things. And he points out what children would see as hypocrisy with their parents decrying the use of drugs on one hand. And then he says something that I've never seen happen. I don't know if it's different in California. He says, then do not hesitate to give their teenage daughter a Valium to calm her down when the boy of her dreams asks some other young lady to the prom. If you ever, ladies, have you ever gotten a Valium? Like when you were upset as a teenager? I didn't. Now, this other one I would agree with. They also watch their parents have a couple of stiff drinks to unwind when they come home from work. A material change in our nation's drug policy would be a material change away from hypocrisy. And he makes a good point here. Doesn't take it far enough, but he says we should not be surprised that we fail at eliminating drug use, because there has never been a civilization in the history of mankind that has not had some form of mind-altering and sometimes addicting drugs to use, misuse, abuse, and get addicted to. Except the Eskimos, because they couldn't grow anything. Now, I don't know if that's true. And I don't know if there wasn't anything in that environment that could be mind-altering. Humans are ingenious at finding it, and actually animals are too. They're finding out. And to me, that then points to a change in my mind that I had. Sometimes libertarians, well, we all fall prey to this, but I'm, talking with libertarians. We like to, or feel like we have to, when we say, oh, legalize all drugs, reflexively say, but drugs are bad, McKay, Are they inherently bad? If it's inherently bad, then human beings throughout history have had a driving urge to do something inherently bad. I actually do not believe drugs are inherently bad. Addiction could be. I'm addicted to caffeine. I'm not going to say that's inherently bad. If it's interfering with your particular life goals or driving you to harm other people, then it's the harm that's bad, not the drug in and of itself. I firmly believe not only in legalization, but destigmatization as well. And I know that's not a a very socially acceptable view right now. And I'm sure some people would be assuming it's because, you know, I've got a secret habit or something. No, I'm a terrible libertarian. I could pass a drug test right now. I don't even like pot. Alrighty. And I'm in Colorado, so damn. It says our great country is actually facing two problems in this area. One is drug harm, and that is certainly a substantial problem. But the other is drug money harm, and that's a more substantial problem. That was my addition at the end there. He says we won't spend $2,000 to $3,000 per year on outpatient drug treatment, but we'll spend the $70,000 to $80,000 per year without hesitation to put them in jail or prison. And it's resulted in our world record on number of people imprisoned. And then he says, let's talk about reality in economic terms. Criminalizing a product necessarily reduces the supply, which then substantially increases the price. None of these drugs are expensive to grow, manufacture, package, or distribute. And he points to the way drug policy has its tentacles in everything and has risen to all these bureaucracies. He says, so the question must be asked, just because some people make a stupid mistake and use or even get themselves addicted to some of these drugs, why should I suffer? See, it's that reflexive, but drugs are bad, okay? Why is it a stupid, because he doesn't say have a stupid mistake and get themselves addicted to. He says stupid mistake and use. Destigmatization is what I am for. Why must I put bars on my windows and see my insurance rates go up simply because drug users are trying to get the unnecessarily high amount of money to buy their drugs? He says an honest discussion of this issue is not at all complete without addressing and acknowledging the drug money harm our country has directly inflicted upon the people of the developing world because of our own appetite for illicit drugs. He says, for example, some fathers who raise opium poppies in Afghanistan lose their crops as a result of our country's eradication efforts, and most of them have already borrowed money from the drug dealers in reliance upon their eventual sale. So they were increasingly being forced to sell their young daughters to the drug dealers to pay their debts. Afghans disparagingly call these young girls loan brides because the fathers give them to the drug dealers as the only way they have to pay their debts. It says, we have lost more of our civil liberties as a result of drug prohibition than anything else. He wrote a book on the failures of drug prohibition and arbitrarily selected 1971 as a cutoff date because that's when he graduated from law school. And then he cited only drug cases decided by the United States Supreme Court and demonstrated how we have lost many of our Fourth Amendment rights, as well as many of our rights under the First, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments as well, solely because of drug prohibition. Now, maybe he didn't see any cases, but I would say Second Amendment as well. Because when you make something illegal and make it dangerous, then there's gun crime. In a similar fashion, we have lost our civil and procedural rights to the government because of asset forfeiture laws in drug cases. And why is no one spreading the alarm? When we lose our precious liberties to the government, we almost never get them back. And all of this has happened because of drug money. Now, here's the next paragraph that I'm like, yes. Another consequence of the failure of our national drug policy is seen when people who are suffering from serious pain are unable to obtain sufficient pain relief medication from their doctors. As a result, today there are literally tens of thousands of people in our country who are unnecessarily in great yet treatable pain. Kara Schultz, one of the staff members, is a I think twice cancer survivor. She had colon cancer, I believe, and is in a lot of cancer support groups and stuff. And she told me that it is not unusual for cancer patients who, are anticipating, the ones with a poor prognosis, and know that they're going to be in ever increasing pain, have stashed away suicide drugs because they don't want to live like that. They just want pain medication. And when I see this war on opioids, I just want to go, fuck you, man. I go through periods of excruciating pain from spinal stenosis in my back, and thank God it hasn't happened in a few years. But I am absolutely terrified now of it happened, because I used to be able to get what I needed, but now, no, you just can't. It's awful. And then he talks about the case of Rush Limbaugh. And it probably feels bad for this being in the book now that he just passed away. He says, I would figuratively love to put this bombastic fellow in jail for lots of reasons. What did he do that was illegal, Judge Gray? But this is not one of them. If he had severe back pain, why should he have had to acquire pain medication illegally in order for him to alleviate it? All because of our nation's drug policy. He says, prohibition never works as well as regulation and control. The reality is, when we prohibit a substance, we give up all of our ability to control it. That's true. But I know he's thinking of government regulation and control. I'm thinking of market regulation and control. And when this is done, we concede the entire market to the control of illicit drug dealers, and they do not ask children for identification. He says, when it comes down to it, different situations with different people should give rise to different societal responses. Our present policy basically preaches that all illicit drugs are equally dangerous, all use is bad. Well, he said that before. And all such drug use should be prohibited. The same approach is taken for adults in the workplace regarding drug testing. And supporting that approach, the Commission on Organized Crime's report in 1986 stated that a person can no more tolerate a little recreational drug use than he or she can tolerate a little recreational smallpox. That's a naive and silly thing to say. It's an absolutely idiotic thing to say. I'll say it, Judge Gray. You are being too nice. So he says, we should hold people accountable for their actions, not for what they put in their bodies. Absolutely. He says, within the last few decades, most of the countries in Western Europe have taken a different approach to the nagging and difficult problems resulting from the presence of mind-altering and sometimes addicting drugs in their communities. The people in these countries almost universally do not condone drug misuse or abuse any more than we do, but they have adopted the more sophisticated understanding that these drugs, dangerous as they can be, are here to stay. So they have decided to be managers of the problems instead of moralizing about them as a matter of chemical chastity. I love that phrase. Or hoping to incarcerate their way out of them. These countries are doing far better with their efforts than we are. In my view, we can learn from their experiences and more sophisticated approach, and we should change our policy accordingly. And then he says, who's winning today with our policy of drug prohibition? And he names 6 people who benefit from our failed policy. He says, obviously, big-time drug dealers here and all around the world. 2, juvenile youth gangs and other hoodlums. 3rd, people in government that are being paid large tax dollars to fight against the first 2 groups. 4th, politicians who get elected and reelected by talking tough on drugs. Fifth, people in the private sector that make money because of increased crime. 6, the terrorists. Says that most of their funding is through drug money. And then he says, well, but who is losing under this policy? Virtually everyone else. And then he gives some examples of changes we can make right now. We should institute programs of needle exchange wherever injecting drug-addicted people are found. We should institute drug maintenance programs in every town and city in which there is a need, under the guidance of medical professionals instead of police officers. Furthermore, we should not hide these programs from our children. We should actually take them there. The drug-addicted people will tell our children the truth, and that is they would have given anything not to start down this path. So third, we should institute programs of honest education. Fourth, we should treat marijuana like alcohol. And that he then just sums up his chapter and concludes with, the sooner you make these changes, the better the entire world will be. And at the end, in conclusion, he says the purpose of this book has been to galvanize discussion about the number of critical issues facing our country. And he says, I don't propose to have all the answers, but if these pages promote more full discussions, then that will be gratification enough. And we have been discussing it. All right, so that is it for that book. And we will be going next to Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, 1972. I've already read through the author's note and, you know, got a feel for how the book is laid out. And we'll start talking about this soon. And again, this won't be like chapter by chapter. It'll probably be more thematically and maybe draw out certain lessons and talk about certain incidents that happen. My point in choosing this book was to really get a feel for the political climate, for the for the period of time that we're covering on Pink Flame of Liberty of LP history, which is the early 70s. Alrighty, talk to you soon. Bye-bye.